side, is a York alumni who always calls for more art and more activism. So they're thrilled that the two go beautifully together. Since its inception in 2008, they've been the coordinator of the trans film screening series alongside Claro Costco. They're also the founder of the Trans Film Library and hopes the doors open soon. More art and activism. Thank you for being here. Asam.
Awesome.
Asam Ahmad is a writer, community organizer, and facilitator. We also have Juli, sorry.
That's okay.
Juli Rivera is an Afro-German trans filmmaker who lives and works in Berlin and Toronto. They're an activist in the Black community in Germany, as well as a photographer. And finally, Vivek, who is right here, is a Toronto-based multimedia artist working in the mediums of music, performance, literature, and film. Vivek also creates and delivers workshops and guest lectures about writing, art, gender, sexuality, and homophobia, and currently facilitates the Supporting Our Youth Pink Ink writing program for queer, transgender, two-spirit, and questioning youth writers. So welcome, and thank you very much for being on the panel.
So thank you and welcome everybody for being here, and thank you for everybody's art. And I'm really excited to get to your reactions and your thoughts, and I hope this is a place where we can experiment with your reactions and ideas about the film, so we're going to get to that. But let's start it off nice and smoothly and start by asking the artists, what was that first seed that was planted when you made this project, or what was your motive, like what was the impetus to make it?
For me, the motivation for the project was last year around this time. Every time I went to go check out queer-based art, a lot of it, I found myself leaving very heavy because I find that so often our stories are rooted in an element of tragedy of some sort, whether it's like coming out narratives or homophobia or we commit suicide. I think those stories are really important to tell, and I have a lot of respect for storytellers that are telling those stories. But I found myself wondering, where are the stories about, the richness of queer experience, of queer life? Where are the stories of that sort of, the stories that I felt like were lacking? And so I thought of posing the question, what do you love about being queer? Very complicated, what I thought was a simple question, but ended up being a very complicated question for people. And I think the other inspiration was just working with queer youth and talking to them about struggling with who they are and wanting to create something that was a little bit more tangible and in the present versus like wait for 10 years when things will get better. Here are a slew of reasons why some people love being queer, and maybe you can draw strength from that, maybe you can draw inspiration from that. So that was sort of the motivation for the project.
And for yours, Juli?
For me, the motivation was the actual day, May Day, and just like living in this area and being part of the change, being part of gentrification, but also having different positions within, and looking back because people looked at me. So it was really easy to just like film because I feel like I didn't have to wait that long to actually get the reactions, because usually I don't wait long to get, or I don't wait and there are some reactions. So I was just like trying to document that and to make it more complex.
And for you, Asam, maybe how was the idea presented to you? Like, what was your motivation to participate?
I think really just because Vivek was doing it, and I knew that there would be a lot of people of color, and I think that's really one of the things I love most about the film is how many people of color you see as opposed to white people. I don't know, I guess I was just thinking about what it meant to be queer for myself as well, so I thought I should do it.
And Juli, I'm going to go back to yours, because your film setup's got this, like, these, just in a couple sentences, it sets it all up. Like, people told me not to go there. That's where I was safe. Like, that was, but like, of course, there's a lot in that message that's left unsaid. Like, all these, like, there's a certain amount of baggage or these gaps that kind of don't need justified. Like, that was, like, the setup done so nicely. But maybe would you like to tell us more about the location of the film and your relationship to it?
Sure. So Berlin Kreuzberg is an area where I choose to live at, but I got so many informations before I actually moved to this area that this area is dangerous because of some kind of people. I got a certain representation in media, or just like how this area got portrayed in the first place. But when I just moved there and I made my own experience there, I was like, oh, finally I have an area where I feel pretty safe because there are a lot of people of color with a lot of different stories. But we've all been in Germany for a long time, and it felt like we came from all over Germany to finally end up being in this area mostly. And so it was kind of clear that we have been there for a long time, and but then it became just such a yuppie place, or just like a really hip place. So there are some things that changed in this. Or I noticed the change. So for myself, and I was like really surprised because when I noticed something is already really obvious in some kind of ways. Yeah, and I was just like thinking of myself as a queer person of color and how I got acceptance or not being accepted in certain settings and contexts. This was an area where I learned a lot, learned being myself, found communities where I could just, learn a lot, but also get more political active. And yeah, but then at the same time there was kind of a sadness, and I wanted to kind of put it in a small little thing to say I love really this area, but I'm also part of it, and there are a lot of things going on that something is leaving, just like slowly, and that is just like there are so many intersections, so many things to think about when we have to think about gentrification. But at the end of the day, just sad.
And like how I'm picking up like newly seniors as somewhat of a love letter, just as very much like your message is like this empowering love letter, and different ways that like the queer aesthetic can do love letters. Like I think that's another strength that's within the community. But I like how collectively like all the films are playing with these tensions, and these tensions of those classic binaries, but like this idea of like closeness versus distance, and like the public sphere versus private sphere, and home, and what I would call like anti-homes, or just like intimacy and alienation, inclusion, exclusion, community, anti-community. And then I draw attention to those binaries not to justify them, but to say that like these films show that you can't sit comfortably in any of those one positions, and so like it already proves that the binary is false. And where you might think you are standing in like a place of comfort, it's actually discomfort or something. So like this mix of these binaries, but one of them is very much that sense of comfort and discomfort. And so maybe we can look at what I love about being queer as this open invitation, so this idea of comfort, and that you're inviting people very much into your apartment, and you're inviting people, the larger people, into the discussion. And so maybe you could talk more about like how, like your relationship with like comfort and discomfort, and how that played in the film.
So my relationship to comfort and discomfort, and how that extended into the film. Well, I mean, I don't know all the people in the film personally, right? Like, I mean, I know Asam in the community, but we're not like BFFs or anything like that. So I think that part of the discomfort for me that was actually really exciting was inviting like so the entire film was shot in my living room, which is, very small, and having people who I don't really know engage in something that for some people is really, really vulnerable. Like, I don't know if you were able to pick up on the vulnerability in some people's answers, but talking about what you love about this really complicated part of your identity is a very personal thing, and to do that in front of a camera, first of all, in the house of somebody who you don't really know, I think that there was a lot of discomfort there, but I think that it was sort of it was about sort of like embracing that and being very respectful of that as well. And one of the things I did was like not define queer for people. So, I think that, as the answers sort of evolve, you see different answers of queer, right? Like somebody at the end, for instance, talks about gay marriage, which, for some of us, we wouldn't include in our definition of queer. And I think that that's one of the things I did so that people did feel comfortable answering the question, that it was about their answer. And I think for me, one of the things I did to set up a comfort for myself was, because so many of my projects involved me as the main body, I took myself out of, I wanted to be only experienced as like the editor, versus being in the film project itself. Because my other work, I'm sort of like, I'm always like part of it in some sort of way.
Awesome. Maybe you can speak to your experience and your level of like, at what points did you feel comfortable and how did you feel discomfortable?
Wow.
You can be honest.
I'm just like remembering. I got lost on the way there. I used my iPhone. And I remember it being like a really small living room. So it was like, there was like one chair and then we were just standing. And I think I had a really good answer for the question, and then there was like traffic or something, and we had to do it over again. That was annoying. Yeah.
Does that, the comfort level you have with participating in the film, does that change? I don't know how many different times you've seen it or with what different audiences, but how does that change over time, your relationship to being in the film?
I've been out since I was 16, so it's really not something I really think about too much. And I do a lot of like video stuff online already, so it's just like, it is what it is.
And I'm going to return to your film, Juli. Like my first viewing experience of it, I was very physically uncomfortable, right? Because you're automatically implicated in it. You're like, okay, I know gentrification is wrong, and I'm not agree, but I'm watching and I can't escape. I can't take a side. Like you're like, so I remember really feeling it in my body, like that sense of discomfort and not knowing what to do. But then you, I guess, like you did all the camera work, and like you as the filmmaker, physically being like in presence with people's reactions. Do you want to talk more about like how you felt or your experiences of filming?
Brings me back to comfort and discomfort. It's not just because I have a camera with me, doesn't make for me a difference if I'm working with a camera or not. The only difference is like a document to spread out the word, because I feel sometimes people question my experience a lot, different experiences, so I'm kind of like, so I don't feel as much comfortable or discomfortable doing that. Sometimes I feel like, okay, I just like do the same thing that maybe the people within the film do, just like objectifying people in order instead of just like seeing the person as a subject. So it's like, okay, so I have to deal with my own kind of crap that comes with just like picking some people. Sometimes I don't know why I pick those. For example, you see the first person in the film, a person of color, and I'm filming the whole time this person of color, and I did not know why. But something was like off from the just like the whole situation, and I saw this person. I was like, this person is calming me down. So I was just like filming the person, but I was observing. But then I saw the other two people coming, and I was like, whoa, what's going on there? So I'm just like, I don't know how to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the reoccurring things I've seen throughout the Rebels Week too is just, and with the queer film in general too, is that that sense of trauma in all the works, and that you can feel that everything's sort of rooted in this trauma, but there's such a resistance to offer work up that's like joyful or has humor, or to even like feel free to laugh with people in a room. Like those are rare windows and opportunities. So I thought like maybe we could talk about the relationship of using art or film to work through trauma, if anybody wants to comment on that.
Like this particular project, or just in general?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's how I've worked through most of my my trauma and experiences through art. This is the first time that I've made something that I feel like that I wanted to make something celebratory, and so that's been kind of interesting, because other works that I've done, so like last year when I was at Rebels, I did Seeking Single White Male, which is my experience of racism in the queer community, which is a lot more fraught and challenging and painful. So it's been nice working in a media with a project that is more celebratory.
Does anybody else want to? Okay. So maybe we can look at more of the use of humor in the works. And Juli, I'm like, yours is a little complicated because it's like, what are we laughing at? Or like, are we laughing because of that discomfort? But like the way you played with lyrics, and then putting those lyrics like to label people on the screen, like the guy eating the burger, or the guy dancing in the street. Like, you want to talk a bit more about how you used humor?
That's a how to answer that. I felt like it was when I look at things, I don't look at them just look one way. So, and I feel like humor is a part of just like getting away with things for me a lot, which I like a lot. But also humor is something that people could pick up depending where they stand or if they want to pick up. So it's like, you can laugh with me, but you don't have to laugh with me. And for example, the music is like, has a totally different setting, and I got, it's like from totally somewhere else, but a friend gave it to me and just like said, if you feel the use of it, just like for some kind of video, just take it. And I was like, I tried to just try it and just put it under just like the pictures that I had. So the musician didn't have a clue. So then I was sending this video to the music artist, and I don't know if they found it funny or not. I still don't know, but they could relate to it because they are from a different area in London, Hackney. So they were telling me about all the changes that happened like maybe 10 to 15 years ago. So yeah, but through humor I got hopefully away with it, so I could still use the music. Just picking up on that.
I just want to say something about trauma. I think for me, I feel trauma, like at its core, is unrepresentable. Like you can't really articulate like what somebody went through. What you can do is like circle around it or try to represent it, but I don't think trauma is actually possible to represent. So what I like about all of these films is that they actually do. Like you can see that there's something traumatic about what we're witnessing, even just within like the documentary, like people speaking, but it's never articulated in this way. So especially like the last film, right, where I think it's like home footage, and so she's describing to you what happened, but we're never actually shown the actual scene because we don't have access to that scene.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw this out to the audience if you have any questions. Yeah.
I feel like from the panel I've heard a lot of like queer people of color is like kind of a big theme. And I just wanted to ask, like, for the films, growing up queer, I've always seen a lot of like, you know, anything media represented was like predominantly white. How did you feel creating your films? Like, did you have that concept in mind, like creating that space where queer and trans people of color could be represented, or did that help shape the development or the ideas of your films at all?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, thanks for your question. I feel like every kind of art that I've been trying to work on, it's something I think about a lot, like wanting it to have a lot of representation for queer people of color, as a queer person of color who struggle with the same thing, where I grew up with not a lot of visibility, and so in some ways it feels like a responsibility for me as a queer person of color artist to be making art that has that representation. So for sure, it's definitely on the forefront.
I could totally relate to it, and I also experienced that. I was told that art is a white thing, kind of. So I wanted to go to an art school in Germany. Kind of, I never got into it. But then I had those artsy friends who were all white, and I was like, oh, maybe it's not something that I could do because I'm a person of color. Maybe other things too, right? Just like, because what do I do with art, right? What do I say with my art? Could I be an artist? So. And I'm still struggling with all that because I see myself more than an activist using some media or just like other stuff to, you know, talk about things that are important for myself and hopefully for my communities that nurtured me, kind of. So, yeah.
More questions? Do anybody want to share with like what you saw powerful or a powerful image that you're going to take away with you? Or perhaps any of the filmmakers want to talk about how, oh, yes.
I really like Juli's use of the camera in regards to facing the people who are also using cameras or using some form of media, because I feel like it was really interesting to watch their discomfort, because when I feel like people, there's an entitlement sometimes that comes with doing any kind of research or photography or getting the right image, and we kind of don't think of those things, or sometimes people don't think of those things when they're scrutinizing or kind of I don't know what the word is, turning people kind of into objects or items, or so I thought that was really interesting to kind of flip that. And I feel like in relation to queerness as an identity, like there's something for me that really stood out in regards to how I see myself as a queer person, because people often identify me as somebody that's straight, or just come to me and start having conversations about how I can be an ally to queer people, and myself looking like back at them, or like throwing that question back at them, becomes very uncomfortable for them, because they're like, well, no, I know for sure, and so that kind of for me really stood out. Cool.
I just wonder if Vivek can talk a bit about the other components.
Yeah, sorry. So there's also, if any of you identify as queer, I don't think we'll have time because I think the room is being booked, but there's an extension to the film. It's just what I love about being queer.tumblr.com, and so people have been submitting answers from all over, answers from Chicago, Vancouver, and so usually what I do is I have a Polaroid camera, and so at screenings people who identify as queer can get their picture taken and write down a caption, but I don't know that we'll have time today, so if you would like to participate in the project, I warmly encourage you to do so, and so you just go to the website, what I love about being queer.tumblr.com, and then it'll show you how to submit, and then it'll get part of your answer would get become part of the project.
I just wanted to say something about that. I hadn't seen the film until I think actually the rough drafts.
Yeah.
Which was like a year ago.
Okay.
So watching it again, I was just thinking about like even who you could pose that question to, right? Like what it means to be queer. Because like how do you know, right? And I think it's a choice, but it's also a huge privilege to be out, to be queer, to identify in such a public way.
Totally.
And I think sometimes that gets lost, and like what it means to be queer just ends up being like, I don't know, very white, very like one way of being queer, where even though that is problematized in the film, but I still feel like there are ways that people can be queer that aren't necessarily visible, that aren't necessarily out in a certain way, whatever that means to be out. And I think we should be more critical of like that identity.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something.
No, and I totally agree. I mean, I think you're right. Like to be out in a certain way does involve a certain privilege. Yeah.
And Kenji couldn't be with us today, but I asked for them to send a snapshot of their brilliance. So the questions they wanted to leave with the audience is the notion of how, as the queer community or even as activists, that need to be critical, but then also when are we being too critical, like again within like internalized oppression, they're like where is that criticalness useful and when is it destructive, and like if we're constantly calling for like this critical awareness, like what are the limits of that? And then thematically they just want to leave the question in all your minds that if we're here to rebel, what are we rebelling against, and to take that question away with you. But maybe I'll just let everyone else have any final thoughts or final statements, or plug upcoming things, whatever you'd like.
The film's available on DVD too, if any of you are interested, and some of the proceeds go to Soy, which is supporting our youth, so the money, some of it goes to Soy, so there's copies here if you're interested.
Final thoughts?
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
I'll say I'm rebelling against just normative ways of being queer and the queer movement being co-opted by the mainstream. And I want to plug It Gets Fatter because it's a project that I'm doing with two other people, and it really talks about like the intersection of queerness and also like bodies and what does it mean to be fat, and deconstructs.
That's something I really liked about the film too, like how much other movements, like people, like
Right.
queerness was an entry point for other activism or other movements, and that like fat activism came up regularly, and just that, yeah, like queerness as this entry point to that criticalness of everything.
Right.
But, so I'll thank everybody for
Thank you so
reviewing everybody's arts in the world, and inviting everybody, of course, to the, oh, did you want to do this? Okay. So the films continue at 4 p.m.
4:30.
4:30, right across the hall-ish. And that's the Arts in Action curated shorts. And then, of course, tonight, talking about all that celebratoriness, closing party, Yours a Rebellion. Where's that at?
Upstairs.
Upstairs.
219.
All right.
Free food, cheap drinks.
All right. Thank you, everybody.